Good morning, cellists. Well, here we are on lesson 23 and we're in week 6, and as you might see or hear in the background, the weather has changed and it's quite rainy. Anyway, let's get on. Today I have an extension to the bow pattern we were doing in the previous class. We were looking at Z bowing, and I'm actually going to create a slight variant on that bow pattern. We're also going to look at, from the left-hand point of view, something that is not often considered or practiced, certainly not in this typical learning architecture for string players. More of that anon. And we will be continuing with Feuillard's number 22 study and with the Bach Gigue. So without further ado, let's get on with the open bow pattern. Yesterday we looked at what I'm terming Z bowing. We had a halfway stroke, a short bow going the other direction, and then we finished off the bow stroke like this. And that execution was all on the string. I also suggested you might try where the interrupted direction in the middle is a short staccato like this. And that you could also add into the equation a change of string. I mean, you could obviously do it on any other string you like, but that perhaps one might do this. By changing the string for the note that is the change of direction, it makes it a little bit easier for our ear and mind to focus on exactly where the change is, the change of direction, in the change of sound and pitch. It's also quite good for a bit of string crossing practice and to give a bit more interest to it. Now today we're going to, as I say, follow on from that. Now, just in case you are not aware of the meter in which we are doing that exercise, in other words the time frame, it's actually in 6/8. So I'll explain where those points of the 6 are. We've got 1, 2, and then the little up bow going the other direction is the 3rd quaver, 3, and then the rest of the bow is the 4, 5, 6, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It's actually really good not necessarily to be hampered with exactly what that rhythm is in how I'm showing you to do this exercise, because I really want you to be aware of the bow length in a natural way, but it does indicate to you that actually the bow can be very, very helpful in guiding your good rhythm. And you could hear by mimicry the fastest stroke for the first 1, 2, stroke back at a regular speed for 3, and then 4, 5, 6 get a little bit more than halfway, because of course you've come back a little bit in the middle. Now, just so you're clear, I've written that out. You can do a freeze frame. So there is the exercise from yesterday, the Z bowing. At the top it's just showing you on the G string, the next manuscript line shows you the D string, and then some variants of changing the string, and the final bottom line there is also showing you the staccato variation. And that this also shows you, of course, clearly what that rhythm is: a crotchet, a quaver and a dotted crotchet. Now the variant is going to be that we're actually going to now have a more equal rhythm, but the bow will still stay in the same direction. I'll show you what I mean. So we're going to have this. So I've got crotchet, quaver, all the time. But the first crotchet and quaver, I change direction, as we've been doing, crotchet, quaver. And then previously we had a dotted crotchet for the rest of the bow. This time we're going to go crotchet. We're still going to continue in that bow, but I'm going to stop the bow and do the final quaver on the rest of that stroke. Now, it might sound a bit confusing. Let's just have another look at that. I'll try it on the D string. So we have a crotchet, a little tiny quaver up bow, and then the rest of the bow stroke we're going to mimic that rhythm. tia, ta. But that the crotchet and quaver are going in the same direction. You don't come back on the direction for that final quaver. I'll show you again. And the same will be true going up. So we go up for a crotchet, down for a quaver, and then we do the same rhythm. So let's do that first. Crotchet, quaver. Now mimic that rhythm, but only go the same direction. Okay. Now it may look a little bit confusing. Let me show you what it looks like on screen. So there it is. You can see the rhythm is very straightforward. Crotchet, quaver, crotchet, quaver. It's just that we are actually going to execute it slightly differently. As you can see, the first pair we will use separate direction bows. The second pair we're doing the same direction bow, which means you'll need to stop on the string and re-articulate for that final quaver. This all bears a relevance to the Feuillard study. And one of the other things that I think would be useful, according to the bottom line of that manuscript that I've just shown you, is if you change the note for the one that goes in the different direction. So the up bow in the middle is the only one, or if it's going the other way, the down bow, but the little note in the middle is the only note which is going in the different direction from everybody else. So if we change that note like this, then you can hear and connect to where the change of direction is. And I could do the same again on the up bow. So if you like, in this example, they'll all be G's if you're travelling this way or this way, and you're just going to change the D where you change the direction. I'll show you again. And the more you do it on repeat, the more you can feel the repetitive rhythm, which is quite dance-like, of course, being in 6/8. And that's going to be directly applicable to the next part of our study. And all of this is about good bow management, good bow control. If you want a little bit more push on that, you can add in the articulation of the staccato quaver. And of course the ones going in the same direction will require, for the up bow, a good push for the little finger. For the down bow, that's more first finger being pinching the bow on the string. Good luck with that. Now I say good luck with that, but actually I've got something a little bit unusual for our left hand technique, or pattern finding. It's inspired by what we were looking at yesterday. In the Bach Gigue, in the first section, we had the rather unusual diversion of going to the dominant minor and then switching to dominant major. And what we mean by that in this instance is going from D minor to D major. So we had so at the end, that F sharp indicates we've gone major, but in the middle, you know, it's in D minor. And just looking at the characteristics of the two, the B flat really stuck out at me, thinking, yeah, here we've got the B flat, which is quite indicative of the D minor, and then the F sharp at the bottom, the D major. And there's my inspiration. I was thinking, yeah, actually we can amalgamate those two characteristics and actually have a convergence, if you like, of the tonalities. It's going to be embodied in a whole tone triad. Now, let's just momentarily rewind. Yesterday we looked at arpeggios. We looked at D minor and D major. And we're now going to look at a different kind of arpeggio, an augmented triad. And that is also an arpeggio. It also sits within the octave, but we divide it differently. So let's just first consider how we divide a major and minor arpeggio. How do we create them? What are the intervals? So for a major, we have a major third, then a minor third, and then a perfect fourth. And that's it. For a minor arpeggio, we reverse the first two intervals. So you have a minor third, then a major third, and then a perfect fourth. And of course they both have in common the A and the D. And of course that A to D is really important in that case because that's a dominant note, the A, going to the tonic D in that instance. Now, the augmented triad, also within the octave, but this is more egalitarian, and basically we divide the octave up into 3 equal intervals, and they're all major thirds. And I suppose the augmentation is really referring to the fifth, that A, is enlarged to go up a semitone. I mean, I'm seeing it in my head as a B flat, but you could also imagine it as an A sharp. Here we have it. It's really, really beautiful, but not commonly practiced, and certainly not in the standard teaching methodologies through grade structures, etc. Momentarily reflecting on what they represent. Obviously these arpeggios are broken chords, and if you play the piano or other instruments where you can play simultaneously all of those notes, you can hear it. I mean, we can hear a chord, and then if we were to put augmented one like this, and those chords are reflected in scales. I'll just touch on that momentarily. So obviously the major is reflective of the major scale, and the minor is reflective of the minor scale, and the augmented is actually reflective of the whole tone scale. But more of that another day. So, the augmented triad itself. Bear with me. First, play your D major arpeggio, but rather than the standard fingering staying in first, move into second position like this. At this point, put a 4 on the D. So I did 4, 1, 4, 2. Now, all we'll do is we'll substitute the A with a B flat. And watch my finger action here. So we have 1 on a D, stretch to F sharp. Now my first finger, I'm going to close that in by a semitone, a displaced semitone, onto the G string, and I'm on a B flat now. Stretch out for the D, which is in the same place as we've just found for the D major. My first finger, which is currently still on a B flat, I bring that in by a semitone, displaced semitone across the string, and I'm now on an F sharp. Then the fourth finger, instead of leaving it where it is, which would be an A, we stretch for a B flat. Again, you bring the first finger in by a displaced semitone, and you're on a D. Stretch back, close, stretch back, close, stretch back. Now in terms of the hand movement, you're seeing there the hand is moving forwards by semitones, and it's the converse to what we do in the diminished, where we go across the string backwards by displaced semitones. So there is something in this hand shape which is familiar, just a little bit back to front to what we normally do. Now don't worry too much about that, and I'm sorry if you felt you have to fast forward to the next bit. But do have a try and a think about it. Even if you just pick out a few of those notes, you could just pick out the simple version at the top. Open D, F sharp, B flat, and then D. Okay, that's enough of that. We're now looking at Feuillard number 22, and we are picking up from bar 9. At this point we have modulated to B minor, which is the relative minor of D, and we're going to apply our new bow pattern. So you see there, the first couple of sentences, ya da 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 da, are the bow pattern I've already shown you. So it's just actually separating out that last down bow there. I'll show you again. There it is. And remembering to keep a pinch, which we are doing on a down bow action with the first finger here. And then we move to up bow. And the pinch here will be controlled and driven by the little finger here. We're also doing a left hand substitution shift at the same time. And then continues as the previous original, which is going to be a smooth second half of the bow. I'll show you what I mean. And at this point, 3 notes in a slur legato. There was no separation in that point. And then back to the similar pattern as before. Again, a long straight note. So what we're actually doing is we're combining the bow pattern, today's new one, which is the, with the original pattern. So the first 2 bars were the new version of the bow pattern, the last 2 were the previous version. And then it continues in the same way. So we get 2 bars of the new pattern. So pretty much the same. We've repeated the bars that were from bar 9 and 10 are repeated at 13 and 14. And we just get a different cadence into B minor, re-established in B minor. Momentarily on keys, that yesterday I did mention the fact that we had arrived at the F sharp minor at the end of bar 8, and I was quite delighted by that because it's quite a long way from D major. And for those interested, it's the dominant minor or the relative minor of the key of D. And I thought that was rather smart that he modulated so elegantly to that point. Anyway, back to the case in hand with regard to bow phrasing. As I mentioned yesterday, it really makes a lot of sense to try this out in both directions. So if you start it up, it really does absolutely go with the melodic shaping, and to try both. I think it's really healthy to explore both solutions. Right, let us now look at the beginning of the second section of the Bach Gigue in G. Very similar to the opening in terms of the bow articulation here. Pretty little phrase, a little 2-bar phrase. And then we rise up a 7th. Remember, Bach loves these rising 7ths. We saw them in the prelude. So we have now a sequence. We have pitch-wise risen. We're taking on a different colour. So the first one sounds really quite bold and cheery. Definitely D major, feels really cheery. After all, we have just arrived in D major in the end of first section. Adds in the 7th. Ooh, going to go somewhere else. And normally we'd expect that to take us back home to G, but it doesn't. It's going to take us on a slightly prolonged journey to E minor, the relative minor. So rather similar to our study that we're doing in parallel. That went from D major to B minor, its relative, and this in Bach we're going to our relative minor of E minor. So there's the sequence, rising sequence going from D major to E minor, also rather pretty in this. He then decides to develop a little enigma. So the tail between the end of the first phrase, we've arrived at the bottom, the next 2 notes belong to the following sequence of the phrase, and he takes that crossover point and he develops it so that from halfway through bar 16, we keep having the same little fragment, this little enigma here. Little staccato note and a pair, staccato and a pair, and it's like a lovely, fantastic lift. You can just absolutely imagine a dance-like feel to this, you know, jumping off your toes. I think it's just really elegantly done. And of course the E then in the middle of bar 16 is a crossover point from the end of one phrase to the beginning of another. It's both. So just to hear that, we have from here. So you can hear from the... We finished one phrase, but the same note became the beginning of the next, which is lovely, rising sevenths. Wow. And we saw this in the prelude. It's a fantastic device for adding thrills and a bit of tension and excitement there. There's also definitely the sense of the two voices, and you can hear happening in the sort of the lower staccato notes. There it is. I think it's really beautiful, very, very enlightening and enlivening. Last note on this, it's a very short fragment today because we've done a lot of technicals. Arriving at this E minor cadence, which is very similar to the exact same shape as we had when we arrived into bar 12, into the dominant. When we arrived into bar 12, previous class, we had this. And because it was the thrill of going back into the major, it really feels right to kind of like really go towards that bottom note. And it feels that you can absolutely get away with it. Mostly, one can't. And I think most of the time, the solutions in cadent points like that would be the upper D is the one that you would aim for. And the rest would be an aside. But because in this first section we're going from minor to major, there's this real sense of you know, a strength that you want to make it louder at the bottom as you bring in the fantastic F sharp. However, I don't think it will work when you have the E minor version, which we're looking at now at bar 19 to 20. If you tried landing loud at the bottom, I think it's a bit gauche, personally. I don't think it quite works. I think this is more of a typical bar cadence where you arrive at the upper pitch of the note. That's the one we're aiming for. And that is more an affirmation slightly under the voice there. And there we'll leave it. I'll just momentarily play those few bars that we're looking at today then.